Gihatoye koi hatoi tatata tatata tumbi hem dunganabe. Het vihet true and tum. In het's own hes inohau. Torim tana. The cup hit the floor before I even had time to moni. The cup hit the floor before I even had time to register what had happened. The coffee spread across the polished tile in a slow, creeping arc. Every head in the restaurant turned. Mayor Garret Holt stood over me, his hand still extended from the flick that had sent my mug flying, and he was laughing. A deep, self-satisfied laugh that bounced off the walls of the town's nicest restaurant, like he owned the place. Because he did. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just sat there with lukewarm coffee dripping from my sleeve, watching him. "My apologies," Garret said, loud enough for the whole dining room to hear. He wasn't apologizing. He was performing. "Didn't see you there. Then again, it's hard to see someone who doesn't belong." He looked around at the other tables, spreading his arms wide. "I've been trying to clean this place up, folks. Some people just don't take the hint." He adjusted his lapels and walked away, nodding to a table of city council members who raised their glasses in his direction. I looked across the table at my wife, Dana. She was staring at her pasta. Her fork was frozen midair. When she finally looked up, her eyes weren't angry. They were calculating. "You should have sat at the bar," she said. "You know he comes here on Fridays." That was it. No outrage. No "are you okay?" Just quiet blame, delivered with the efficiency of someone who had rehearsed it. It had started with the land. 8 months before that restaurant, before the coffee, before everything, I had inherited a parcel of land from my grandfather on the east edge of town. 42 acres of timber and creek, running along the edge of what was quickly becoming the most desirable stretch of real estate in Harlan County, Kentucky. I was 32 years old. I had done 2 tours in Iraq as Army Rangers and 1 in Afghanistan. I had come home quiet, married Dana 4 years earlier, and bought a small house on the edge of Millhaven. I fixed motorcycles for a living out of a garage behind our house. I charged fair prices. I kept to myself. The land was unexpected. My grandfather left it to me, and not to his 3 other grandchildren, because, as the attorney read from the will, Nate always knew what to keep and what to let go of. 3 weeks after I inherited it, Garret Holt knocked on my door. He wasn't the kind of man who came to your door. He sent people, so when he stood on my porch with that broad, practiced smile and his expensive boots, I knew immediately it was serious. "Beautiful piece of property your grandfather left you," he said. "Man of real vision, your grandfather." "He was," I said. "I'd like to make you an offer. Fair market. Actually above fair market. $350,000 for the parcel. Cash." I did the math instantly. The land was worth at least double that once the new highway bypass came through. I had already seen the preliminary survey maps at the county clerk's office. The bypass was going to run adjacent to that exact parcel. Whoever owned that land when the state bought the easement rights was going to clear over $500,000. "I'm not selling," I said. Garrett's smile stayed exactly where it was. But something behind his eyes shifted. "Everything has a price, son." "Not everything," I said, "but thanks for stopping by." I closed the door. That was the beginning. Within 2 weeks of turning Garret down, the county assessor's office reevaluated my garage as a commercial property, despite the fact that it sat on residential land. My property taxes jumped from $1,100 a year to over $6,000. My business license was flagged for a zoning violation that hadn't existed the previous year. A health inspector showed up, which made no sense for a motorcycle shop, and cited me for a ventilation issue that required a contractor's correction before I could reopen. Dana handled it worse than I did. She paced the kitchen. She cried on the phone to her sister. She kept saying, "Why can't you just sell the land, Nate? We don't even use it." I explained the bypass to her. She said I was being paranoid, that the bypass might not even happen. It was going to happen. I had the county clerk documents. On a Thursday evening in late November, I was cleaning up the garage when I heard Dana's voice through the door into the house. She was speaking quietly, in that flattened tone people use when they don't want to carry. "He won't budge," she said. "I know. I've tried. He's being impossible. A pause. He has no idea how serious this is getting. He thinks it's about the land. Another pause, longer. Yeah, okay, I'll see you Sunday. I stood there with a rag in my hand, the grease on my fingers going cold. He has no idea. I had been trained to notice things that didn't fit. That phrase didn't fit. The next morning, after Dana left for her job at the school district's administrative office, I went to the cabinet above the refrigerator where I kept a small black nylon pouch. I hadn't opened it in over a year. Inside was a slim audio recorder, 2 pinhole cameras the size of shirt buttons, and an old burner phone still in the packaging. I had bought the kit 3 years ago when a neighboring property owner had accused me of dumping oil on his land. I never needed it. I'd kept it. I wasn't proud of what I did next, but I was trained to gather information before I drew conclusions. I placed one of the cameras behind the books on the living room shelf, angled toward the sofa. I placed the audio recorder under the lip of the kitchen counter. I went to work. That evening I listened. Dana was on the phone again, shorter this time. She said, "I know," 3 times. She laughed once. A soft, private laugh that I hadn't heard directed at me in over a year. Then she said, "He trusts me. That's the whole problem. He trusts me." I sat in the garage for a long time after that. I needed help that existed outside Harlan County. There was one person I trusted completely. His name was Reed. We had served together from Fort Benning to Kandahar. He had gotten out 2 years before me and gone to law school on the GI Bill. He was now a private attorney in Lexington, 70 miles away, specializing in civil litigation and real estate law. I called him from the burner. "Nate." He picked up on the second ring. "I need your eyes on something," I said. "Property law and possibly criminal conspiracy." A pause. "How bad?" "The mayor of my county is trying to force me off land that sits on a highway bypass corridor, and I think my wife is helping him." A longer pause. "Send me the survey documents. Don't talk to anyone local. Don't sign anything. Don't sell." "I know," I said. "You still got that ranger patience?" "Working on it." "Good," Reed said. "Sit tight. I'll drive up Saturday." Reed came on Saturday while Dana said she was visiting her sister. She wasn't visiting her sister. The tracker I had placed on her car, a magnetic GPS unit I charged up and stuck to the frame behind the rear wheel well, put her at a property on the south side of the lake. I looked up the address. It was registered to an LLC called Millhaven Growth Partners. Millhaven Growth Partners was majority owned by Garret Holt. Reed sat at my kitchen table with his laptop and 3 manila folders. "Okay," he said, spreading documents out. "The bypass is real. The easement corridor runs within 60 feet of your northern property line. If the state acquires that easement, the remaining land spikes in value because it becomes commercially adjacent. We're talking development potential, retail, storage, whatever. The actual buyout could be anywhere from $400,000 to $800,000 depending on the final corridor width." "And Garret knows this," I said. "Garret definitely knows this," Reed said. "His construction company has won 41% of all county municipal contracts over the past 6 years. Roads, bridges, the new school gymnasium. He's also in the State Transportation Advisory Committee, which means he had early access to the bypass route before it went public. So he's positioning himself to buy land cheap before the announcement drives the price up." "That's insider dealing at the municipal level," Reed said. "It's not technically illegal in Kentucky the way it would be in securities law. But if he used public office resources to facilitate private financial gain, there's a case." "What about Dana?" Reed opened the third folder. His expression was careful and neutral, which meant it was bad. "I pulled your joint account activity," he said. 3 weeks ago, a wire transfer. $12,000. Went to an account in her maiden name. 12,000. We had 14,000 in savings. That was almost everything." "She's already started moving assets," I said. "Nate," Reed said, "she's not just cheating on you. She's liquidating." I stared at the kitchen wall. There was a small chip in the paint near the window where I had bumped a ladder last spring. I had meant to fix it. Small things you keep meaning to fix. What's the play? I asked. We need him to make a move we can document, Reed said. Right now, we have circumstantial evidence of financial misconduct, but nothing that ties it together cleanly. If we can get him to make a direct threat or take a direct illegal action, that changes the picture. He's already been harassing my business, I said. Fake zoning violations, surprise inspections. That's harassment. It's ugly, but it's not enough alone. Reed leaned back. What would make him go bigger? I thought about it. If he thought I was about to sell to someone else. Reed smiled slowly. A competing buyer. A fake competing buyer, I said. Someone who contacts my land agent expressing interest in the parcel for, say, a solar development project. High enough offer to make it look like I'm close to closing. If Garret thinks he's losing that land to a third party, he'll move fast and he'll make mistakes, Reed said. Men like him don't handle competition well. They're used to being the only option. How fast can you set that up? I have a paralegal who can pose as a development company rep, Reed said. We create a shell inquiry, draft a letter of intent, make it look real. Do it, I said, but quietly. I need a few more days of surveillance. Nate, Reed paused. Be careful with Dana. If she's reporting to him, anything you say at home is going straight to Garret. I know, I said. I've been careful. After Reed left, I went and sat on the porch for a long time. The field across the road was brown and flat with late autumn. The sky was that particular shade of gray that Kentucky gets in December. Not stormy, just heavy, like the sky itself is tired. I thought about the man I had been overseas. The patience, the ability to go cold and precise when everything around you was loud and hot. I had left that version of myself in a duffel bag for 4 years trying to just be Nate. The neighbor, the mechanic, Dana's husband. Turns out I was going to need him one more time. The following Wednesday, Dana came home from work and told me she'd been talking to a financial advisor. Her own financial advisor. She said it casually like it was nothing, while she put groceries away. We should probably think about separate accounts, she said, not looking at me. Just for clarity, you know how it is with the business having a rough patch. Sure, I said. Whatever you think is best. She glanced at me. She was waiting for me to push back or get suspicious. When I didn't, she relaxed. That evening, she relaxed. That evening, I listened to the kitchen recording. She called Garret 20 minutes after dinner. He agreed to separate accounts, she said. He didn't even question it. A man's voice. Smooth. Confident. Good. When this land issue is resolved, the divorce will be cleaner. Make sure you have documented reasons. Text him. Start an argument. We need a paper trail showing incompatibility. What about the transfer I already made? It's fine. The account is clean. Just keep him calm and don't let him talk to any lawyers. Too late for that, Garret. Reed's fake development company sent a letter of intent to my land agent on a Thursday. By Friday afternoon, I could tell the news had reached Garret. A deputy sheriff I had never met knocked on my garage door around 4 in the afternoon. He was young, uncomfortable, and had the look of a man who had been sent somewhere he didn't want to be. Mr. Hale, he said, Mayor Holt asked me to pass along an invitation. He'd like to meet with you this evening. Privately. He thinks there may have been some miscommunication about your property. Tell the mayor I'm free at 7, I said. He can come here. The deputy blinked. He usually prefers to meet at his office. I'm sure he does, I said. 7 o'clock. Tell him I'll have coffee on. Garret arrived at 7:15 with a man in a gray suit who was introduced as his development coordinator, and whose job appeared to be standing slightly behind Garret and nodding. I brought them into the kitchen. I put coffee on the table. I sat across from Garret. Reed was parked 2 streets away, connected to me through an earpiece I was wearing in my left ear. He was listening to everything through the phone in my shirt pocket. Nate, Garret started. He had that practiced warmth, the kind that comes from decades of shaking hands at county fairs. I think we got off on the wrong foot. I came on too strong with my initial offer. I see that. No hard feelings, I said. I'm prepared to come up, he said. Significantly. $525,000. That's real money for a piece of land you're not using. I've actually had another inquiry, I said. I kept my voice neutral, slightly apologetic. A development group. They sent a letter of intent earlier this week. Garrett's jaw tightened. Just slightly, but I saw it. Who? He asked. I'm not at liberty to say at this stage, I said. Nate. His voice dropped the warmth. I want you to understand something. I've been very patient with you. But this county runs the way it runs for a reason. There are systems in place, relationships. You're new here, relatively speaking. You don't understand how things work. Help me understand, I said. He leaned forward. The zoning issues at your garage, those can go away. The property tax reassessment, that can be reviewed. A man in my position can make life very smooth or very complicated in a place like this. I'm offering you a choice. And if I sell to the other group? I asked. Garret looked at me for a long moment. I'd be very disappointed, he said. And I'd make sure the right people knew that you weren't a cooperative member of this community. Permit delays. Inspection schedules. It can be a very slow process, Nate, building anything in a county where the mayor isn't your friend. In my ear, Reed's voice, got it. That's coercion. Keep going. I appreciate you being direct, I said, reaching for my coffee cup. I wrapped both hands around it casually. The small button camera in my shirt pocket had a clear sight line to Garrett's face. Let me think about it overnight. Of course, Garret said, standing and straightening his jacket. His development coordinator stood with him like a shadow. Take the night. But Nate, this offer doesn't stay open indefinitely. Other opportunities come to men like me. I understand, I said. I'll be in touch. I walked them to the door. As Garret stepped onto the porch, he paused and turned back. One more thing, he said. His voice was quieter now, flat and honest in a way the rest of the conversation hadn't been. Dana is a smart woman. She understands where opportunities lie. I think you'd be wise to listen to her perspective on this. He held my gaze for a beat and then walked to his car. I closed the door. In my ear, Reed said, "Brother, you just built a case." The next 4 days were the longest of my life. I played the part of a man softening, a man reconsidering. I told Dana over dinner that I was thinking Garret might have a point, that maybe the land was more trouble than it was worth. I let her encourage me. I watched her try to hide the relief in her eyes and fail. She called Garret from the bedroom that night. I listened. He's close, she said. A couple more days. I'll push him Sunday. Reed spent those 4 days building the filing. We had the audio recordings from my home, my property legally, recorded with my consent in a state that allows single-party consent. We had the video of Garrett's kitchen visit and his direct threat about permits and inspections. We had the bank transfer from our joint account. We had documentation of the fabricated zoning violations, all of which had appeared within 3 weeks of my refusal to sell, and all of which were dismissed or unsubstantiated when Reed formally requested the county's supporting records. Reed also found something I hadn't expected. One of Garrett's municipal contracts, a road resurfacing project from 2 years prior, had been awarded to his construction company at a figure 40% above the next lowest bid. The county engineer who approved it had subsequently received a consulting job at Millhaven Growth Partners, Garrett's LLC, within 60 days of the contract award. That was bribery. That was federal. Reed called his contact at the state attorney general's office on a Friday afternoon. The AG's office called the FBI field office in Lexington on Friday evening. On Saturday morning, I drove to Dana's sister's house where Dana claimed to be spending the weekend. I knocked on the door. Her sister answered, confused. Dana wasn't there. She hadn't been there. The GPS tracker put Dana's car at the lake house for the 3rd weekend running. I drove to the lake house. I parked on the public road and sat there for 40 minutes. I didn't need to go inside, I just needed to know for certain. I already knew. I drove home and sat on my porch with a cup of coffee and watched the field until dark. On Monday, 2 FBI agents and a state investigator arrived at Garret Holt's office at 9 in the morning with a warrant. By 10:30, they were at his lake house. By noon, they had the hard drives from Millhaven Growth Partners server, 3 years of financial records showing the pattern of contract manipulation, and a communication log between Garret and the county engineer that was about as subtle as a brick through a window. I was in Reed's car parked outside the county courthouse when his phone rang. "They're executing the warrant," Reed said, listening. "All 3 locations simultaneously." He looked at me. "It's done." "Not yet," I said. Dana came home that evening around 6. I was sitting at the kitchen table. The TV wasn't on. I wasn't on my phone. I was just sitting there with my hands folded. She stopped in the doorway and read the room the way people do when they know something is different. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Sit down, Dana," I said. She sat across from me slowly. She set her bag on the floor. "Garret Holt was served federal warrants today," I said. "The FBI has his financial records, his communications, and a documented pattern of bribery involving county construction contracts." Her face went through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. Shock, then the calculation of how to respond to shock, then something quieter and harder. "That's terrible," she said carefully. I placed my phone on the table. I pressed play on the recording from the kitchen. Her own voice filled the space between us. "He trusts me." That's the whole problem. I stopped it there. Dana looked at the phone, then at me. Her eyes were very still. "How long?" she asked. Her voice was flat now past pretense. "Long enough," I said. "The 12,000 you moved last month. The account in your maiden name. I have all of it documented." She was quiet for a moment. "Then, I want you to know that I did love you. In the beginning." "I believe that," I said. "I'm not sure it changes what happened." "What happens now?" she asked. "I've spoken with an attorney," I said. "You're not named in the federal investigation because your involvement was limited and indirect. But you moved marital assets without consent. That's going to be part of the divorce proceedings." She flinched at the word divorce. Even knowing it was coming, she flinched. "The house," she said, "is in my name," I said. "Has been since before we married. You know that." She pressed her lips together. One tear, just one, ran down the side of her face. She didn't wipe it. "I thought he could give me something," she said. "Something bigger than this." She gestured vaguely at the kitchen, the house, the whole quiet, modest shape of our life. I thought I was thinking ahead. "And now?" She looked at her hands. "Now I'm living at my sister's until I figure out the next thing." "That's probably right," I said. She stood up. She picked up her bag. At the doorway she paused, and for a moment I saw the woman I had married. Not the person she'd become over the past year, but the earlier version. It didn't change anything, but I saw her. "I'm sorry, Nate," she said. "I know," I said. "Go take care of yourself." She left. I sat in the quiet kitchen for a while. The coffee maker clicked and hummed in the corner. Outside a car passed. Normal sounds. Ordinary evening. 3 weeks later, I was at the county courthouse for Garret Holt's arraignment. I wasn't required to be there. I went because I felt I should witness it. He came in wearing a dark suit that no longer fit the way it once had. He had lost weight fast, the way men do when the air goes out of them. His lawyer, expensive and calm, stood beside him. The federal charges included bribery of a public official, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit extortion. The state charges added abuse of public office and misappropriation of municipal resources. He was looking at 12 to 18 years on the federal counts alone. As they led him past the gallery toward the front, he saw me. He stopped walking for just a moment, not long enough for the marshal to react, but long enough to look at me. I looked back. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel satisfied. I felt something simpler than both of those things. I felt like the account had been settled. Like a number that had been wrong for a long time had finally been corrected. He looked away first. Reed met me outside on the courthouse steps afterward. It was a cold morning, one of those flat-skied December days where the sun never quite gets going. "State Highway Authority confirmed the easement corridor last week," he said, handing me a folded document. They want to discuss the formal acquisition of the right-of-way. Their current offer is $480,000. Counter at $600, I six. Reed smiled. Already drafted the response. And the rest of the land? Still yours, he said. Free and clear, with a significant increase in assessed value once the development news goes public. I put the document in my jacket pocket. Down the street, a woman was walking a dog. A kid on a bicycle cut across the parking lot, standing up on the pedals. Regular Tuesday morning. The kind that exists whether or not anyone is fighting over land or lying to their spouse or trying to quietly dismantle someone's life. You going to stay in Millhaven? Reed asked. I had been thinking about that for 3 weeks. The garage, the house, the field where the for sale sign had briefly stood in my imagination before I had decided against it. For now, I said, there's a lot of work to do on the property, and I've got bikes backed up 2 weeks. Reed shook his head. You took down a sitting mayor and your first concern is your backlog. Those bikes aren't going to fix themselves, I said. He laughed and we shook hands. He walked to his car. I walked to my truck. Before I started the engine, I sat for a moment. The town square was in front of me, the diner where I usually got coffee in the morning, the hardware store I had been going to since I was a kid visiting my grandfather, the old brick building that used to be a post office. A few people passing on the sidewalk looked at me differently than they had 2 months ago. I didn't know quite what to do with that. I hadn't done any of it for their opinion. I had done it because the alternative was losing everything I had quietly built and letting people who confused power with authority walk away without consequence. But I noticed it, and I won't pretend it meant nothing. I started the truck and drove home. The garage needed opening. There was a 72 Harley on the lift that had been waiting long enough. I pulled in, rolled up the door, and let the cold air circulate while I got my tools out. The work was simple, clean, specific, one bolt at a time. That was enough for now. That spring, the bypass announcement went official. The county held a public meeting. New interim leadership at the mayor's office. New faces on the county commission. A few of the older council members who had sat quietly through Garrett's years quietly did not run for re-election. I didn't go to the meeting. I had said everything I needed to say. Reed called afterward. Standing room only. The land valuation question came up 3 times. Your name was mentioned once. Favorably? I asked. Let's say neutrally, he said, which in this county is practically a statue. I was outside when he called, splitting wood for the stove. There was a stack of it growing against the side of the house. Enough for 2 winters. Reed, I said. Yeah, thank you. For all of it. That's what brothers are for, he said. Get some sleep. I stacked the last of the wood and went inside. Made dinner. Ate it at the kitchen table alone, which by that point had stopped feeling like a loss and had begun to feel like something closer to peace. My grandfather used to say that land doesn't lie to you. It's people who lie. The land is just the land. It was there before you, and it will be there after you, and all you can really do is take care of it while it's in your hands. He was right about most things. I took care of what was mine. That was the whole story. I've thought a lot about what Garret actually wanted from me. Not the land. Not really. Men like him have land. What he wanted was submission. He wanted me to look at him the way everyone else in that town looked at him. Like he was the ceiling. The final word. The thing you didn't bump up against if you wanted a quiet life. When I didn't give him that, the coffee cup became the answer. There's something I've come to understand since all of it ended. The people who try to take what's yours. They count on you being alone. Garret had the county commission. He had the zoning board, the health inspector, the deputy who pulled me over. Dana had his ear and his promises. They built a system around isolating me, making the pressure so distributed and relentless that I'd eventually see selling as the only rational move. What they didn't account for was Reed. One phone call to one man who knew the law and knew me, and the whole architecture started to crack. That's not luck. That's what it means to spend years building real relationships instead of useful ones. I think about Dana more than I expected to. Not with anger, that burned off pretty quickly. More with a kind of tired recognition. She looked at what I had and saw a ceiling. She looked at Garret and saw a door. That's a failure of imagination, not just ethics. She thought that power you borrow from someone else is the same as power you build yourself. It isn't. The day his accounts were frozen was the day hers went with them. She had traded everything for a position next to a man who was already falling, and she didn't know it until the floor disappeared. The land is still mine. The bypass corridor easement settled for just under 600,000. I reinvested most of it back into the property. There's a small equipment barn going up in the spring where the old fence line used to run. Nothing dramatic, just ground being used the way ground is supposed to be used. What I keep coming back to is something my grandfather said once, years before he left me the parcel. He said the worst thing you can do when someone tries to take something from you is panic, because panic is just fear wearing urgency as a costume. You make worse decisions when you're afraid of losing something than when you're focused on what's actually true. What was true in my case was that Garrett's scheme had holes in it from the beginning. I just had to be steady long enough to let Reed find them. I'm not going to tell you I wasn't angry. I was. When I listened to Dana's voice on that recorder saying he trusts me like it was a liability, not a quality, something in me went very cold. But cold isn't the same as broken. Cold is just focused. And focus, when the situation actually calls for it, is the most useful thing a person can bring to a fight. That's really all it came down to. Not rank, not training, not some military superpower. Just patience, documentation, one trusted friend, and the refusal to sign anything. The rest took care of itself.